like to welcome everybody to panel, which is the pursuit of happiness. How can we better care for the whole student in higher education? I'm Mike Huseby. I'm the CEO and chairman of BNED, or Barnes & Noble Education. Our mission at Barnes & Noble Education is to enhance the academic and social purpose of the higher ed institutions that we partner with and the students that we mutually serve. When we spoke to ASU GSV about a topic, we really, I think, found an interesting one and an important one to all of us, which is student happiness and mental health. I think we can probably all agree that we've all been touched by that conversation about mental health in some way personally. And it's a very broad national conversation. And I guess what we're going to explore today are some questions and some views of the great panel we're fortunate to have with us today about what do we really know about mental health and its impact on our students? What are the current challenges? What are we looking at that we can do kind of in the short term, and then maybe looking out a little bit further into the future, how might we be able to impact mental health in a positive way to better serve the students that was our objectives. Just by way of background, Barnes & Noble Education serves approximately 6 million students through the physical and virtual bookstores and websites that we manage for our high ed partners. We also do some direct-to-student digital study aids that we're developing, but that platform really gives us a great opportunity to conduct survey research with the students that we serve, which we did in anticipation of this conference on this topic. And we'll get into some of those results, and there's actually a one-pager in the back that you can take with you that summarizes some of those results. But I think the most important thing is let's hear from our experts. There are detailed bios for everybody on the dais in the conference app on the web page. I'd encourage you to look at those. I'm not going to do justice to their bios in the very brief introduction I'm going to give them, but I'd like to start. My far left is Daniel Eisenberg. He's a health economist and professor at the University of Michigan. Dan's goal is to improve understandings of how to invest effectively in the mental health of young people, particularly college students, and he directs the Healthy Minds Network. Seated in the middle is Anna Gonzalez, who's Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Harvey Mudd College. Anna is responsible for a number of important things at the college, including residential life, student activities, career services, health and wellness, institutional diversity, and community engagement. Seated next to me is Ron Goldman, who's the co-founder and CEO of Cognito. That's a company that uses simulation technology to harness the power of conversations with virtual humans to prepare people to effectively lead real-life conversations that improve health. So real people actually do those conversations, but use virtual simulations. Fascinating technology. I should also mention that in your program, you probably see that Victor Schwartz was supposed to be on the panel. Victor could not be with us today. He had an urgent client matter that he had to attend to in New York, but I wanted to give him some recognition. He participated with us in preparing for this, and I think most importantly, he does a tremendous amount of good work for young adults and teens in mental health and suicide prevention. He's the Chief Medical Officer of the JED Foundation, so he sends his regrets. Okay, so with that, let's jump in. First off, on the current challenges, maybe Daniel, let's start with you. The recent survey that we did at BNED showed that almost 90% of students have a ton of stress and anxiety, and almost 2/3 suffer from what they would call depression. So your annual Healthy Mind study does a deep dive into most of the prevalent mental health challenges facing college students. What do you think the key challenges are? What have you seen in your study? What does it expose, and how are those challenges impacting today's student?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on this panel. We've been doing our national survey study of college student mental health since 2007, and so I'll just give you just kind of a 1-minute overview of some of the data that we've collected. First of all, I think the clearest trend is that more and more young people, including college students, are seeking help for mental health. There's no doubt that's happening. We can objectively measure it by who's going into the counseling center. I think it's a little bit less clear whether there's been an increase in symptoms in the population in terms of depression, suicidal risk. anxiety symptoms. But I think overall, there does appear to be a significant rise in symptoms. But also, along with the rise in help seeking, we also are seeing a reduction in stigma or an improvement in attitudes and kind of improvement in familiarity and knowledge about mental health services. So I'd say it's both kind of positive and negative in the sense that there's more risk today than ever, but there's also more interest and kind of openness to seeking help and to addressing mental health among young people today.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Anna, maybe talking to you about what you do, your particular frame of reference on campus, and surveys show that at least 75% of students say they're worried about the current state of our government, our country, which adds stress. And given that data point, what other social and cultural kind of economic factors and trends have you seen have surfaced that really play into mental health? How do they impact the stress levels? What do you see in practice?
Yeah, so in practice, in higher ed, colleges and universities, Harvey Mudd is my 5th institution that I've worked at. And what we're hearing now more and more so is with social media and 24-hour news and everything that they're seeing, and they do know what's happening, there's a fear of both violence, in particular gun violence, and then desensitized to the violence. Young people are actually very stressed and very aware that are they going to be a generation that will be desensitized to all of the violence that they're seeing globally. And so I think that's the new stuff that we're seeing. And the other piece is Generation Z in particular has been impacted by so much of what happened economically with the market in 2008. That they are still very worried about this idea of return on investment for them, not just the money, but the time that they're putting in. Is higher education worth it for them? And if so, which is the best? And if they are at the best institution, however they define it, how can they get through it very successfully? You know, overall, those things really put so much stressors on them that we worry as practitioners in terms of how do we engage them in happiness, in a little fun, and better wellness.
Okay. Ron, how about you? What do you see happening currently? Your company, Cognito, arms institutions with technology to help students. And maybe you could talk about that a little bit and kind of what role is technology playing today and how does it interact with some of the more traditional resources like on-campus counseling?
Right. Happy to be here. I think for us, the company concentrates on identifying critical conversations that happens in education, in healthcare, at the home, and helping people build the skills and the confidence to manage those conversations. Specifically mental health, which is where we started. The company started a little bit after Virginia Tech, where we had a lot of schools who came to us and said, could you help faculty, can you help staff be more comfortable in conversation with students they are concerned about so that they can get them to help earlier. So we used our simulation technology where you can practice talking with virtual students as a way to build that confidence and the skill. Specifically in higher ed, and Daniel is a little bit modest about his data, what he really changed is the way people look at mental health because he showed an economic case for connecting students with mental health support, and it actually reduces dropouts. So you could really trace it back to retention, which makes it relevant for everybody on school. So where we came in is really trying to move people from awareness, which a lot of great campaigns in public health and mental health have done, and move them into action. If we know that a lot of students are not seeking help, how can we motivate them to do it? And obviously, conversations when they're well managed are very, very powerful in driving changes in behavior, and that's where we come in. So we partner with schools. There's about 300 of them now that use us as part of their mental health and wellness program to help these faculty and staff and the students get more comfortable in these conversations. We found that if you help students be more comfortable talking to their peers, they actually are more willing to actually seek help for themselves. It's kind of an interesting way to get them engaged in it, easier to say, would you like to learn how to help a friend of yours than saying, you may have a problem, right, let me teach you what to do. So that's where we come in with higher ed.
That's fascinating, 300 schools. Daniel, you said something that there was some good news that there are more seeking help, more awareness. When does that awareness education really start? And as a parent of, I have 4 kids, 3 of whom are out of college, 1 is still in. What kind of awareness can you give parents before, maybe it's a question for Anna, before the student gets to school? So that, and what do you think about formalized training on the way in to educate both students and parents on some of the things they're going to be running into in terms of stress levels? Are some schools doing that, mandating, Anna? Or?
Do you want to go first?
Go ahead. I can chime in after.
So actually, we're one of the 300 schools that use Cognito. And so 30% of our students, we just launched it this year. And we're actually looking at it, faculty and staff are going to be the next phase. And we're looking at, because we're already using modules for families for consent to help them understand what consent looks like in college. We thought, wouldn't it be great to have a module like Cognito for families? Because families and their students, so I just don't say parents, you know, 'cause sometimes it's aunts or grandparents or spouses, partners, but family members are often the ones that are texting or calling, you know, 5 to 7 times a day with their student. And so if they were aware, if they were more resourced and versed about issues of mental health or how to be an ally when it comes to their students' wellness, I think that would go a long way. So we're doing that in some other areas. I think we still need to do that in areas of wellness. One of the things that we are doing is teaching students and their families how to use wellness resources, and not just doctors and nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists, which are great, but actually what interventions and what wellness resources there are, including gyms and issues of eating habits and living healthy in the community where the colleges are placed at. So our student orientation piece is actually going to take families off campus. And we're fortunate that our campus, you can walk to what we call the village to actually show them all those resources that they can encourage their student to go to. So.
Financial stress is a big part of what you hear about. Is there education on how to deal with financial stress as well? Or, you know, that's something that hits a lot of students and families, especially those on financial aid, which is about half of our population. So I don't know, how do you deal with that kind of stress?
Again, I'm not part of a school, but we talk to a lot of them. You have more and more that are making programs around wellness, which is really, you know, kind of goes a little bit above mental health, because now you talk about stress of other issues, you're talking about even substance use, and you talk about sexual assault on campus. You have this entire kind of other elements that play into the learning experience of the student, and you have more and more schools that are making it mandatory. We have schools like Princeton that mandates our program as well as other programs. So it's really becoming part of what schools do, and more. And I think, again, the economic case really helps. And you can see that they're addressing the main topics and slowly starting to get to the financial stress, the political aspect. Diversity is a big topic that leads sometimes to stress that schools are addressing as well as their campuses are more diverse. And it's really kind of growing and growing.
So Anna, when you do budgets, is this something that comes up in the school budget as a priority, or is it something that there's pushback on from those who have control of the purse strings, or how would you characterize that?
No, actually it is a priority for many schools, and I think schools who have not made it a priority are late in the game. It is a priority for all the schools that I've gone to with regards to support. It is, however, not sustainable to assume and to think that every student will have a counselor on campus. So it really are programs like Cognito. There's a program that we're using now, My Resource, a bunch of different ones that really look to how do we get students before they get to the what we call green, yellow, red. Before they even get to the yellow, how do they live a life in which it's more green, right? So more positive, and they can monitor their wellness. You know, really quick, back to the financial stressors. It is both the students who have high loans, so what we call, let's say, Pell eligible students, but actually the students who have also zero loans, or sometimes what we call full pays, are just as stressed in different ways because they're worried that they can't have the same financial capital that their parents might have had to put them through that school. And so it's not an advertising, I've never worked there, but we're looking at copying the Ohio State's wellness program that has a financial sustainability model for students as one way to look at that.
Daniel, any other thoughts on the current situation?
Yeah, I guess I'm glad you raised financial stress because I think sometimes that gets overlooked as a risk factor because we focus maybe more on kind of like the fact that today's children are coddled or kind of helicopter parents and that sort of thing. But really, the greatest risk factor for mental health issues has always been really, and it continues to be, economic and financial stress. So for example, in our data, when you look at students who report frequent financial stress, they're about twice as likely to have a positive screen, so significant symptoms of depression or anxiety. They're maybe at 30 to 40% of those students as compared to more like 15 or 20% of students who aren't reporting financial stress. So that's really one of the highest risk groups. I also wanted to just comment on awareness, just to say that I think awareness about mental health and its importance it's not enough, because college students are aware that exercise and regular sleep hours are good for their health, and yet look at their behaviors. Look at all of us are kind of subject to that. So it's important, but I think the question is, well, how can we make mental health really more a part of their lives? How can we ingrain it in their lives? How can we interweave it into academic life, into financial aid, kind of all of the parts of college life that they already care about and they're already kind of enmeshed in.
So aside from some of the things we've heard, how do you do that? I mean, how do you convince a freshman or a sophomore? And it looks like those 2 years are where there's stress in all 4 years, but maybe I'll ask the question, do you see the stress levels, the mental health issues being more prevalent in the early years of college experience, realizing we have a lot of non-traditional students now and that type of thing that deal with balancing workloads, families, jobs. Your data, where do you see, is there a prevalence of where it occurs, or is it spread pretty evenly across all types of students at all?
I'd say
grades?
It's pretty even across the years of college. We do see when students enter college, we've looked at a couple of cohorts. Entering college, students seem to be doing better in terms of their mental health than they are several months later. So the transition into college, which I think we're all aware of, that's difficult for many students, and that does lead to greater mental health risk. But aside from that, I think it's pretty even across the years.
Yeah.
Some of the media reports that we read in preparation for the panel talked about students seeking on-campus support services that sometimes had to wait days and weeks to get a counseling appointment. What other practices or technologies can schools implement today to help alleviate that kind of a resource issue? I know it's kind of a broad question. You touched on it a little bit, but you know that when you need help, you need help.
Yes.
First off, as you said, you have to identify it, kind of the red, yellow, green. If you have that kind of a system, that's great. But if someone's trying to get in to see a therapist, how big a problem is that in terms of the need to wait? Well, I'll put it off and they never come back. Is that a real issue? The level of resources? It's a very kind of a case-by-case probably answer, but anybody wants to.
I can comment again just from talking to schools that sometimes you will get institutions that are concerned about an influx in people coming to them and how will they address it, which for people who are mental health providers, it's kind of a complicated case because they never want to say no to anyone who's coming in. At the same time, they are starting to allocate more and more budgets for kind of outsourced counseling center services, if it's people who are on call, if it's telemedicine, so people can get some help, over kind of a FaceTime. So they are expanding their capacity, but I think, again, we've been at it now for 10 years. At the beginning, people were kind of like, sounds like a really nice to have for some schools, and you can see the shift in the clients, and you can see the shift in the people that we're talking to. Now it's the provost or the president who gets involved because they know it's a bottom line impact, and therefore the budgets are becoming more and more available. So larger schools continuously, we hear less and less about a capacity issue. It's still a concern. I don't think anybody who runs a counseling center will say, I got everybody I want. But it seems to have more of a buy-in from leadership to really help build that capacity at the same time.
Yeah, from all the schools that I've been at, including now, there has always been consistently a wait list, right? A waiting period. It could be because of your schedule. It could be because there's not enough counselors. It's interesting because I think 25 years ago, when I first was looking at resident advisors or RAs, the typical training would look like alcohol, sobriety, noise level of the res halls. And now our RAs, right, students, and then live-on professional staff are trained to ask some basic questions to look at suicide ideation, right, which is a shift from the field. Many schools, not all, have established 24-hour protocol systems in which they can call in for emergency. And then many counseling centers on campuses also have an emergency person where one of the case managers or a dean or a staff member will take a student to say, I think the student needs more help. I think there's an emergency. Can you see the student right away? So I think schools are trying to have those implementations to see what the emergency is. Can you catch everyone? There's not a guarantee. And I think it's partly because of resources, but more importantly, I think it's about the students themselves may not know sometimes, unless it's too late, that they need someone to help them at that moment.
How are you finding them when they come in from secondary school or wherever they come in from if they're non-traditional? Do they have an awareness, or does you have to start from ground zero? I suppose it depends on their family situation to a certain extent, but on average, what do you see? How big a hill is it to climb to get them to recognize when they have a problem and ask for help?
So first gen, what we're finding in my experience, and the data might show as well, first gen in particular, but also certain groups from particular minoritized communities are not have not really utilized mental health services, wellness services through K through 12. And so the first time that many of this are even consciously thinking about or using that kind of support is in their college years. And I'm seeing them more their sophomore, junior, senior. First years, I think they're hearing about it. And so that group in particular for us, in particular first gen students, need that kind of information to share with them. And they might not come from schools where they have enough counselors and nurses as well, so they're not even getting it from K through 12. And so unlike other schools that have full-time professional wellness folks in their high schools or where they're coming from, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's consistent with the national data that we have is some of the groups that are less likely to use mental health services are first-generation students, students from lower-income families. Actually, across race ethnicity, Asian American students and international students are also less likely to use services. On average, women are a bit more likely to use services than men. But I think we are seeing increases in service use in pretty much all of these groups. So they're all kind of trending up, even if they're kind of on different baselines that they've started from.
We've got about 15 minutes left. Let's kind of jump to the future. If you could wave your magic wand, each one of you, and maybe take 3 or 4 minutes each and say, you said 10 years ago, kind of here's it was nice to have. Now, where would you like to be in 5 years, let's say, or 10 years? Jump forward and look back in terms of what specific or general things have changed to really better attack and serve this problem. Start with you, Ron. Use your imagination.
15 minutes may not be enough, but I think if I'm a school, I think 5 years from now, the way that the school differentiates themselves as a competitive advantage, how they deal with student wellness will be one of them. I think parents are pushing for it, the students are pushing for it, the statistics are pushing for it, and schools really gotta change how they're thinking about it, and I think they are. But it will be literally, we'll have schools that are not just known for academic they'll be known for how they deal with student wellness as part of really giving them a better education and better set of skills for life, right? Because these stresses don't go away. They probably increase when you go out there looking for your first job. So I think that's one. I think technology obviously is going to play a big role in it. And we all are on our phones and our different devices. And if we can use the time that you're there to actually give you skills or help screen you and motivate you to get the help that you need to get, or give you some of those other skills for resiliency and other kind of emotional skills that you can have, I think there will be a lot there that we are planning on doing, and I'm sure other companies will do. There's a great business opportunity there to do a lot, not just helping students build academic skills, but build these life skills that are as important in our field.
Is there any specific app or technology that you're seeing develop that you're really excited about right now, or
some people
that
talk
you can talk
about
you know?
Virtual humans as up and coming. I mean, for us, again, we're in the business of harnessing the power of conversation with virtual humans as a way to do all of that, from therapy to screening to skill building. There's a lot that can be done with what we do right now with machine learning and AI and other kind of advances that are coming in that can help make it better. For the sake of making it better, right? We don't want to put in something because it's trendy if it doesn't actually help anything. So we plan to do a lot there, and I think as people, again, interact more and more with devices, and they don't just interact by clicking, they interact by talking. If you think about how much more our user experience is voice-driven, not necessarily click-driven, I think that you will see a lot there where some of these virtual humans are not necessarily graphical representations, but they're more kind of Siri or Alexa type, but not to give you the weather, but to actually be an agent that can help you as you go.
So is this more of a B2B, you're selling more to the institution, or you see this evolving into more of a direct-to-student application as well? Or?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we are a B2B business. I think that as the mindset of all of us is shifting, there will be a consumer market where parents and students and faculty will drive to want to have this. And patients will want to have this. We do a lot of work in healthcare. How do you, even as a caregiver, talk to a loved one about changing their behavior so that they get better? I think that there is down the line a consumer play. Right now we're a B2B, but the business that buying from us is really making it available to the consumer.
So there's a lot of upside, not just business-wise, but in terms of the progress we can make using technology. Yeah,
I mean, we got, over the years, we have about 1 million users so far, which is kind of an impressive number, but in reality, it's really a very, very small percentage.
The 300 schools you mentioned, I'm sorry, 300 schools you mentioned, are they all, are they stratified, like across the board from community colleges up to Ivy League? Or
yeah, we have, one of our largest ongoing relationship is with the California Community College system. So you have examples like that, but then you have the Princeton and the kind of Ivy League schools. So this is not an issue that not at all. I mean, this is across everyone, and it's nice to see that that's how they're looking at it.
That's great to hear. So Daniel, if you could jump forward 5 years, and you think about Healthy Minds, studying where you want it to be, what you're going to get out of that.
Yeah, well, so I think we're getting, I have to admit, we're getting a little tired of just collecting data. We have a good picture now, I think, of the population. There's still more to learn, and each school needs to learn more about their own individual population, their own students. But with our Healthy Minds Network, we are trying to, right now, shift towards, we're kind of thinking ourselves as more of an innovation network rather than sort of just a research network. And what we mean by that is how can we more directly support and partner with solutions as opposed to just describing the issues. And so, for example, we have been in contact with many technology companies, Ron's company and other companies. There are a lot of newer companies, a lot of companies interested in addressing student mental health. Many of these companies started by students themselves or recent graduates who are very attuned to the issues. And so we're trying to think about how can we as researchers and kind of data people help test these solutions in a kind of scientifically rigorous way, and then help the best solutions rise to the top and kind of spread more widely And then also, how can we help institutions find out about kind of which programs are actually best? Because that's so hard. Even when you have kind of a small number of traditional programs, it's hard to know which one's best. And then multiply it by tenfold, and it's technology that's evolving so quickly. It's bewildering for, I think, campus administrators. And so we're hoping we can help a little bit with that, just kind of making sense of what's out there.
How much do you do in exporting your knowledge of how to quantify the financial impact, say, on specific schools and that type of thing? I mean, do you actually deal with other schools to help them develop their formulas for quantifying the cost benefit of mental health initiatives, that type of thing? Or?
Yeah, well, as part of the data collection that we do, we quantify, we provide a simple memo to each school that summarizes how, if they were to think about a hypothetical program, say a program that would provide services to reduce depression among 500 students, what would that translate in terms of expected retention of students? So I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just building off of our data that has looked at how depression predicts risk of dropping out, of departing an institution. But we can translate that for each institution. Some institutions are tuition driven, as you know, and so for them, retention means increased tuition revenue. Other institutions can easily replace students, but there's a broader societal case for, of course, increasing college education, because we know that for each additional year of college education, people are going to go on and be more productive throughout their lives, and that's beneficial to everybody, to companies, to society.
It would seem a lot of the things you're talking about would apply to beyond college too, right? I mean, if you were a business and you wanted to invest in mental health, as well as college is a business, but if you were a commercial business, so do you take it beyond the academic community, and do you deal with the commercial business? Or do you see things like that? Because it's a nationwide problem.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen inklings of interest from certain, like, large corporations. And of course, the employee wellness movement is huge. But I think actually making that connection with college student wellness, I haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen people talk about it. But we would love for the private sector to invest in college student mental health if they because I think a lot of them do feel like, a lot of leaders do feel like that's important for the future employees.
Well, if you can build healthy students, they're going to be healthy adults and healthy workforce. It just makes sense. Okay, Anna, it's your turn. If you want the campus, the college, all the different functions you have of the future, you jump forward 5 years, you have unlimited resources, or maybe within the constraints that you see. What would you aspire to, I guess, out 5 years, 10 years in terms of really tackling this problem and getting it under wraps?
Yeah, well, my president would always tell you never give Dr. G a magic wand, because I go for the big. I'd like to erase all of the problems that stress the students out. You know, Imagine by John Lennon always comes to mind, but I know that won't happen yet. So, but I would love a couple of things. One is looking at the fact I used to fight and struggle against technology because today, tomorrow, students 6 to 8 hours a day looking at some kind of technology, using computers, laptops, phones, etc. And so now I need to figure out how to be better friends with technology, to get to exactly how can that be an aid to help them with their issues of wellness. I think on the second piece, though, is to figure out a way for schools to do, whether it's just encouraging them to say, okay, let's all put it down for a little bit. We did a no technology 3 hours, challenge at our campus, and it was super cool. Students actually really loved it, and I said it can't count when you're sleeping, although because they were trying to negotiate that. But how can you, just take a walk and see the environment back to the old school days, right? Writing your thoughts down. When you write it down on a piece of paper, you retain 60% more than if you actually type it out. And so how can you utilize some of the things from the past that is still present to appreciate it? So combining both technology, but also non-technology, and get them a sense of who they are and to be just a little bit more well. And I think the third is our students. We just did a survey for our students in Claremont, and what we found was students love and appreciate differences. right? This generation really does. They're not afraid of it. But what they are failing is actually to talk to each other, to debate, and to actually have a conflict resolution. And so that actually causes them the highest stress level in the survey that we just did, is that piece. So how do we engage them using technology, but actually also using face-to-face conversations and give them that, so at least it can minimize these stressors for them.
That's really fascinating.
Great things.
Well, I think that we're really fortunate not just to have such a great panel, but that we have 3 such brilliant, dedicated people working with our students and with this issue. And I think the conclusion is pretty obvious that, you know, they've demonstrated that this is a major issue. It's a national conversation as well as an academic college-age conversation. And getting this issue dealt with at this age group with this, you know, if you're looking at motivated young people that want to learn, they want to be successful, are dealing with these issues. You know, there's a whole other population under stress and anxiety that aren't even in this basket. And it seems to me like this could really be an incubation, and it is. A lot of the technology using to help, you know, expand this to the national conversation, not that we don't have plenty to do, you know, in higher ed. So with that, I'd really encourage you to give us a strong thank you to our wonderful panel. Okay, great job.